Are you really going to eat that? Podcast episode 128. Hey everybody, how are you doing? How are we all feeling? Mid-February already. It is starting to get a little bit lighter, just a tiny bit lighter. So thank you so much for joining me this week. If you haven't listened to last week's episode, that's episode 127, I would suggest going and have a listen first. So last week we talked a little bit about being tired and tired all the time, tat as we call it in the trade. And some of the signs and things that you can do. And this week is a bit of a follow on from that. Now, this week is a little bit more technical. I am going to be honest. I'm going to talk to you this week about adrenal fatigue. So this week, I'm going to explain to you what your adrenals are, how they can affect our energy, and why they might become fatigued. So it's a little bit of a sciencey one. Now, I could talk about this for hours. Please, this comes with a little bit of a caveat that this is not a complete explanation. So you're not going to pass your science GCSE necessarily with this, you're not necessarily going to pass your biomed foundation with this. I am giving it to you in the terms that I think make the most amount of sense. So, there's no point blinding with science, I don't think. You want to understand how it works in a way that makes sense to you. And that is what I'm doing today. So I'm missing some bits out. I'm not giving you everything because you don't need all of the information, but I'm going to try and give you as deep dive as I can so that you understand what they are. So I think the first thing you want to know is, well, what are our adrenal glands? So our adrenal glands, they are glands. That's a surprise, okay? And they are situated on top of your kidneys. They're tiny little things. Your kidneys are tiny anyway, and these are on top of your kidneys. And they help produce hormones that help to regulate energy, our immune system, our blood pressure, and our response to stress. So the adrenals produce our sex hormones. So our sex hormones are testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. And these are made in the adrenals. So there's two parts of the adrenals, but let's just say that they make the sex hormones. They also make adrenaline and cortisol as stress hormones. They also make noradrenaline as well, but adrenaline and cortisol are the main ones we want to be talking about today. So they make these hormones which help to regulate our reaction to lots of things. Like I said, our immune system, our blood pressure, our response to stress. So they're very, very important. They might only be tiny. They're tiny but mighty. Adrenal fatigue is your adrenal glands getting tired because they are doing something, working too hard, working harder than they need be. Heart fatigue. Well, it's kind of a heart attack, isn't it? It's the same, we don't call it heart fatigue, but actually, if your heart is overworked, you can get a heart attack. So adrenal fatigue, it makes sense that if they are working harder than they need to be, producing stuff that they don't need to be, not getting, not producing at the right levels, then they're going to become fatigued. When we have stress, basically, our body sees it as a threat. If we are stressed, we get into that fight or flight, the autonomic nervous system where it's that fight or flight. And this is a perceived stress on our body. So we release hormones to allow our body to deal with that threat, whatever that threat will be. So, in ancient times, would have been that stress, prehistoric man, that stress would have been something was going to eat us, and that would have been our stress. So we would have reduced adrenaline, an immediate hormone from the adrenal glands, there you go, immediate that it creates blood flow to our muscles, and it increases our heart rate so that we can run away from whatever that threat might be. If you are trying to run for the bus because you are late for work, then you will release adrenaline to get you to be able to run faster, get there quicker. So, you've heard about that things about when people have been able to lift like cars off children and things like that, how powerful the body is. That's adrenaline. That is the immediate stress response, or the immediate, situation response, if you like. There is something going on that we need to react to, and our immediate reaction is adrenaline. We want to be reducing those levels of cortisol. Now, cortisol, we feel this across every single body system. So the adrenals, heart rate pumping, and the muscles going, but cortisol is on every single part of our body. And we associate this mostly in modern world, with stress. Typically, we do want cortisol. So we should have cortisol. We don't not want cortisol. And this is the key when we're talking about regulating. It's not a case of like getting rid of the cortisol. We want to get the cortisol when we need it. So cortisol typically or traditionally, or if you want it in there's no such thing as perfection, but ideally what should happen is we release a most amount of cortisol in the morning. It's a thing that helps us get out of bed in the mornings. It's a thing that helps us get that motivation to get the day going. And it rises in the morning. It should reach its peak about lunchtime, and then it should drop slowly in the afternoon. And it's at a minimum level at midnight, when we should be fast asleep, and we should have been asleep for a few hours as well. So that's its lowest level. And that's how cortisol should be in our body. That is the ideal state. And it gets us up and it gets us motivated, gets us doing, gives us that enthusiasm to get to work, to earn the money, to pay for the food, to feed us. So that's why we need those cortisol. And if we don't have cortisol at the right time, then we can become unmotivated. Every time we release stress, every time we experience stress, we release cortisol. If we release too much, then we start to become resistant to it. We're not listening to it in the same way. And diabetes is the same kind of thing. So type 2 diabetes is basically when we've been producing too much insulin, and our body becomes resistant to the insulin. And then what we have to then do eventually is inject more insulin into our body, because we're not listening to what's there already. We're not going to inject more cortisol into our bodies, but this is the kind of thing that's happening, is we're not listening to it because we have too much of it. So the key, as I said, is balanced. We want that HPA axis to be activated at times of need. We need it to motivate and move us. So, if something is going on in our life, if we do need to be repped into that stressful situation, if we're going into a meeting at work and we need to be on top form, whatever that might be, we're doing a presentation, me recording my podcast, of course I'm going to have cortisol levels quite high at the moment, because I need to be performing. I need my brain to be thinking. I need to remember that word that I always keep forgetting. Sorry to Ben for my podcast editor, because I forgot a word earlier and had to re-record a little bit of this. But you can see what I mean. We feel it more as we get older. When we're younger, we can power through it, but our body starts to naturally produce less as we get a little bit older, and we really do feel it. We really do notice it. So it's always worth thinking about your cortisol levels and trying to balance them as early as you can. And if you're listening to this and you're going, well, I'm only 26, it doesn't matter. It does actually, because the earlier that you can balance these hormones, the earlier that you can respect what's going on in your body, the less dysregulation you're going to have. When I was talking about having really high cortisol at the end of the day and low cortisol in the morning, so you can't get out of bed. So this is from years and years and years of abuse. It just doesn't happen overnight. It happens from those years of burning the candle at both ends, of pushing yourself through too much stress. So think about it. The earlier you can balance things, the better it's going to be in the long term. Don't wait until your body cries out and says, enough, do it now. So what can you do? Let's do some practical stuff. You know me, I like my practical stuff. So what can we do? So simply put, reducing stress is key to easing the pressure on our adrenal glands. It's as simple as that, reducing your stress levels. Now, of course, we need stress. It's not a case of never having it. And, I think I've emphasized that quite a lot today, is it's about balance, producing it when we need it, and then backing back off when we don't need it. So the first thing you need to think about perhaps is resetting that circadian rhythm. So maybe going for a walk in the mornings. Remember, it's light activated. So in the mornings when we get up, in ancestry, we would have gotten up at daylight. So that would have been the height of the cortisol level. So getting up and getting outside, getting that light in the mornings is really key. And the same thing is not having the light in the evening. Now, blue light devices such as your mobile phone and your laptop will activate cortisol. So if you are working late into the night, or if you're checking your phone last thing before you go to bed, you're getting that cortisol because it's a blue light and your body goes, wake up, I need to do something, because you are asking it to do something. You are reading something on your phone where you're going to have to think, you're going to have to reply. So ideally, put your phones away at least an hour before you go to bed. Try not to work late at night. Have a cut-off time. I try to make my cut-off time. I do some presentations in the evening because I need to, but I will never do them after 8 o'clock. And ideally, I rarely, they're like once a week maximum for a few weeks, and then I will make sure I have a bit of a break so that everything resets and stuff. So try not to work too late. If you really need to, or if you're working on something, if you've got a project, I know when I was studying and stuff, and you have to work later in the night, you can get blue light blocking glasses, which help. So they can help, but you're still stimulating the mind. So try not to. A really, really simple way of activating the parasympathetic nervous system, so this rest and digest, the calm and rebalancing our HPA axis, is to breathe deeply. I really like the box breathing. So you breathe in for the count of 4 or 5, whatever your choice is. You hold it for 4 or 5, breathe out for 4 or 5, and then you hold it for 4 or 5. And I kind of think about it as a box. And so I'll breathe in to go up the box, hold it across the box, and just doing that and concentrating on that. Firstly, it gets rid of that stress in your brain, but also actually that deep breathing, oxygenating your body and calming everything down, will really, really activate that parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest, the one that we want active most of time. I call it the parasympathetic nervous system because it's paramount that we have it activated most of the time. Reduce unnecessary stressors. Just have a look at your life and think, what is stressing me and can I get rid of it? If you've got a super stressful friend that every time you go out with them, you're like, oh, I don't want it. Well, maybe now's the time to rethink that relationship. If you are doing things and it's really causing you stress and you don't need to, then stop doing it. We all need to work. We all need to earn money to survive. So it's not always possible to reduce, to take work out of the equation. But if we can take some of the things that work out of the equation, which we don't need to do, stop worrying ourselves. We are uniquely, as a species, able to create stress from worrying about what might happen. So if that is the one unnecessary stressor, worrying about what might happen is a stress. So try to stop worrying and try to remove those unnecessary stressors. The sooner you understand how to nourish your adrenal glands, the easier your body will be in balance. And that's what we're asking for, is about getting those hormones when we need them, so we don't have that fatigue, so we don't have that dysregulation, because we're producing them when they're meant to be. I hope that's helped this week. I hope there's some tips in there that you can take away. And I hope that it's given you some energy to make those changes. Don't forget that we are always grateful for any review that you can leave. So pop over to iTunes if you can and leave us a review. All of my links are in the show notes. Go to hillstart.me.uk/128. This is episode 128. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I really appreciate your support. And if you can, pop over, leave me a review, and I will see you next week for episode 129.